Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very special live. I'm so excited to be here with you all and just to really go over a few of the things that I'm working on with my team. But before we do that, I wanted to take the time to just introduce myself to you all. My name is Joëlle Kabisoso, and I am the founder and executive director of Sisters in Sync. We are not a nonprofit organization here in Hamilton, Ontario, with the mission to help Black women and girls to be, become, and belong through programs, services, and advocacy. And today I'm going to be sharing with you all a little bit about a campaign that we've started called hashtag maybe next time there shouldn't be a next time, which is really the inspiration for a lot of the advocacy work that we are currently undertaking as an organization. And so we'll go over 5 essential steps that we've deemed necessary when supporting Black women and girls as they navigate through the disclosure process. So, a little bit about myself and the campaign. At age 17, I was the victim of a racially motivated gang rape. And when I saw help from the police, unfortunately, the detective told me, maybe next time you shouldn't drink too much. And this dismissive response made me feel very small and made me feel as though I was a willing participant in my own victimization. And so that just really reduced my significance and it reduced everything that I thought the police was, right? I saw them as a protector, somebody that could be there to support me. And in that moment, I truly felt alone. And over the years, I've heard countless stories from women and girls with similar experiences. And one of the common theme was the belief that victims are often responsible for the violence against them, but that they also play a significant role in preventing it, which is why we started the hashtag maybe next time there shouldn't be a next time. And so we really want people to understand that there shouldn't be a next time. We shouldn't normalize this idea that ending gender-based violence relies solely on women and girls, perhaps not drinking too much or wearing a certain type of outfit to avoid getting raped or avoid being sexually assaulted or not going out at a certain time. We as women and girls want to be able to experience all the freedoms that everybody has. And so it's very important that together we stand together to be able to say, no, there shouldn't be a next time. And let's stop normalizing these things to a point where we no longer allow victims or survivors to be survivors or to be victims. And so this narrative only continues to damage and shift the blame onto us as if we're the ones at the cause of all of this violence. And so, if you're ready, I would love to take you on this journey of really exploring 5 essential ways that when you're working with Black girls and women, that you can truly support them from the moment they decide to disclose to the moment after they disclose an experience of sexual assault or violence. So, one of the first things that I saw was very important in my journey, and as well as through some of the consultations we've been doing with our community, is the need to believe and validate their experience. In my case, again, I was told by the police that maybe next time I shouldn't drink too much. And unfortunately, when I brought this up to family and friends, a lot of people had questions surrounding my motives, my intentions for being out on that day. And despite the fact that there was countless of proof on social media that they had shared and countless people that had actually come forward to share similar experiences with this group of men, I still wasn't believed. And I still found myself in a place where I had to try to justify that I didn't plan this and that I'm telling the truth and that all of this did happen. And so, especially when we look at the dynamics of Black women and girls and how we're viewed in media and how, unfortunately, some societies and communities view us, we are often hypersexualized. We're often viewed under stereotypes such as the Jezebel or the Mammy or the angry Black woman, which oftentimes leads to people validating the violence that's committed towards us or to us. And so making sure that we understand some of those historical components, some of the key terminologies, right? one of the things that we explore a lot with the organization is the idea of the adultification bias, which is a bias that often views especially Black girls as less deserving of protection, of more mature than they actually are, or of less deserving of care and support. And so when we are doing this work, we need to make sure that we understand some of these terminologies and understand some of these experiences so that we're not projecting some of our biases or some of our prejudice, which then results in people not getting the care and the support that they need, or which just prevents them in general from wanting to actually access services. The next thing is to be mindful of who is in the room. So we know that as survivors and as victims, we don't always decide to disclose to the police right away. Some may choose to speak to a friend, some may choose to speak to a community worker, or even go to their place of worship and speak to a pastor or speak to somebody that plays a leadership role in that space. And we really want to make sure that we are mindful of who is in the room or who is supporting. Sometimes, and I see this a lot in services, in agencies, there tends to be a lack of representation. And with that lack of representation, we can find ourselves often projecting or often not fully connecting with some of the experiences that folks are going through. But one of the biggest thing, especially if someone chooses to not disclose to a trained professional, is ensuring that confidentiality is key. Many of us, I'm from the Congolese community, so we are a pretty small community here in Hamilton, and everybody knows one another. And so if somebody does choose to go more of the non-traditional route and going to somebody close to them in their community or going to a friend or a family member, we really want to ensure that those that are supporting understand why confidentiality is very, very important. In small communities, it's very easy for word to go around. And if somebody is not yet ready to disclose their experience to the public, we don't want to put them in a position where they feel as though now everybody knows their business and they don't have the option or the opportunity to choose what is shared, when it's shared, and how it's shared. The next thing is making sure that we're offering culturally sensitive support. So we talked a little bit about in our first approach, ensuring that we understand some of the different stereotypes, some of the labels, some of the historical components that affect how we as society or that affect the experiences of Black women and girls. And so when we are developing services or when we are currently working in positions that require you to support survivors or victims in a space where you might not look like them or you might not understand fully their experiences, we're finding that it's imperative to make sure that you're meeting survivors where they're at and that we're offering culturally sensitive, but also culturally responsive, right? Things that are more responsive than reactive. A lot of the times we tend to support people after the fact, or we tend to look to get training or additional professional development after the fact, neglecting that, sometimes people cannot wait for you to get educated or they cannot wait for you to find resources on their specific experience or how their culture understands certain things. So making sure that the minute you're ready to step into a role that requires supporting Black women and girls, that requires helping them navigate the system, the reality is many of us don't know what the system really is. And in my case, I had no idea of what the process looked like. I didn't know that at the age that I was, I needed somebody to actually, a social worker to be present. I didn't know that there was different levels to disclosing and the aftermath of the disclosure process. And so when we are really called to do this work, it's very important that we try to get as much information, as much education as possible, because we could also be the reason that somebody feels unsafe if we're not educated, if we're not providing those responsive services. And I'm so thankful in this moment for the Law Foundation of Ontario and the Black Opportunity Fund for actually providing us with funding to be able to develop a culturally responsive service, which we are still in the process of working on. And it's called We Got You Sis. And so we are developing a toolkit to support professionals, but also people in our communities. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, sometimes survivors or victims may not necessarily want to go to a trained professional or may not necessarily want to go to the police, but confides more in their sisters or their friends or their teacher. And so this toolkit is really designed to provide that cultural awareness, but also practical tips and ways that people can mobilize themselves to be able to offer that kind of support that survivors need. And so this is something that isn't a work in progress. And once it is ready, we will be able to share that with you all. The second last thing is advocating for their rights and their needs. A couple of years ago, we saw a big surge in the Me Too movements where many women and girls began sharing their different experiences with sexual assault, with rape, with violence. And we saw that unfortunately, at some point, the movement excluded a lot of voices of marginalized women, of racialized women and girls. And so when we are in this position, it's so important for us as support systems to ensure that we are advocating for their rights and their needs without stepping over boundaries or without completely erasing their voices and taking the forefront. Even myself as a Black woman, when I support Black women and girls, I always try to make sure to take a back seat, to make sure that I'm there when they need me, I'm there when they're ready for me, and that I'm not making the movement or I'm not making their journey completely about me or about what I understand or what I think they should be advocating for. So really getting educated and speaking with those that you're working with, right? To try to understand, where do you need me to show up, right? How do you want me to speak on your behalf or to speak with you or to speak for you or to stand beside you? A lot of times, and I found that in my case, I didn't want to necessarily have people supporting me on this journey, because when I did let my guard down and I did allow people to advocate for my rights and my needs, it became some sort of like media attention that was no longer directed at the support that I needed, but more so what X person was doing in this space and how, it was kind of pushing a different agenda. I think that's really what I'm trying to say, is making sure that your intentions when you're advocating for their rights and needs is as pure and informed as possible. We don't want to put ourselves or put those that we work with in a position where they feel like we are forcing them to take a certain action or we are forcing them to say a certain thing that might not necessarily be aligned with what their healing journey looks like. And lastly, is that continuous education and training. I'm sure a lot of you that are on this live right now can kind of, agree with me when I say that oftentimes when we find ourselves in spaces that are training opportunities or continuous education, we are just represented by women in those spaces. And so, one of the things that we are really trying to do is ensuring that we're moving away from an approach that centers women and girls specifically as the ones required to get education and to get training to respond to certain things. I'm a big believer that men, that, brothers, husbands, partners, whatever you want to call them, play a crucial role in ensuring that violence stops, right? And so, really making sure that we are including their voices into these spaces. Back in March, we held our second Maybe Next Time Summit. we had opportunity to hear from different service workers, to hear from different folks in the field. But most importantly, we created a space for men to be there and to share some of their experiences, to share some of their worries when it comes to how they see themselves fit in this space. And we found that with the feedback that we received, many want to be involved, many want to be able to advocate, but don't necessarily know how or don't necessarily know where to get some of the education. So, from our end, it's a matter of ensuring that we are promoting education and training opportunities that are inclusive and also accessible, but that also doesn't always villainize. I don't know if that's a word, but that vilify men that are in the space, kind of pointing the fingers at them, because sometimes that's what may stop somebody who genuinely wants to support the mission, who genuinely wants to be involved from coming, is feeling like maybe if I'm in this room, people will be uncomfortable. Maybe I'll be seen as part of the problem. And so when it comes to that part, for us as an organization, we've been really focused on how can we break some of those barriers so that we're not overrepresented in these spaces by just women and girls that want to get educated and that want to get training, but that it could also be very inviting for healthy dialogue, for active participation for men and for those that are around us that may oftentimes not know where to go to get informed or to get educated. And so that kind of sums up the five essential approaches and best practices that we've determined as an organization helps us support Black women and girls. These are definitely things, if in your work you want to adopt it, we encourage you to do so. Or if you want to speak with us a little bit more to understand some of the work that we're doing and to be a part of this development of the toolkit, we invite you to get connected with me. You can reach me at Joëlle at sistersinsync.org, or there will be a link available where we're going to be putting up some of the findings from the consultations that we're holding currently, and as well as our finalized toolkit. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.